Live stream is
Ooh, so we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button, hit the little notification bell. You won't regret it. If you do, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. So let's just make sure we've got everything going here. Yeah, it's still doing the one screen at a time. It's not doing the grid. Oh, well, I'll sort that out for next time. All right, so we have Rev Kai, my friend. How are you today?
still cold. It
I'm
is
sure.
freezing on this side of the world.
And I'm bloody boiling hot.
I don't know. Maybe we need to tie the weather up in some ropes and mail it to each other.
Oh. Okay, so we're going to carry on with the topic of this month, which is money magic. I think there's two main things that have become apparent. One is that years ago, when I first started witchcraft and magic, whenever somebody brought up the topic of money and money magic, the first thing you did was go to the earth element and the gnomes and things like that. And I think that's changed a lot over the past several years. It's become more focused on the air element because money has become more digital. I keep saying fluid, but when I say fluid, I think of the water element rather than the air element. But at the same time, air is still fluid. Yeah, in that aspect. And the other thing was most people in a planetary aspect, they usually go straight to Jupiter. They don't even consider the other planets, such as Mercury, even Venus. There's Rachel on this channel. She actually did a working with the Venus planetary pentacles from the Greater Key of Solomon. And it actually worked for her on a monetary basis. She got an old broken down car, but it's what she needed at the time to actually, get herself going again. And that was using Venus. So, I think that the main thing is that Jupiter is kind of like the big boss. I keep calling him. He's the one that builds the kingdom, and the rest help along. What do you feel?
Well, Jupiter is the energy of expansion and organization, especially civic organization. It's one of the big major 7 planets, Jupiter and Saturn, and they deal with big things, not personal things. So when you use Jupiter for money magic, you're talking about, economy. You're talking about community level money, but also expanding to that end. So it's logical that if you have money, you add Jupiter influence and you get more money, but if you don't have money, then I wouldn't start with Jupiter. I would start with Venus, because Venus is the hand mirror that reflects what we value and what we find beautiful and appealing. And a lot of us find having money pretty appealing. It's something we value. We literally talk about the value of our money. So I don't know that of the 7 major planets used in sorcery, anyone's bigger than the other necessarily influence-wise. They just have different realms and different times of empowerment. So, like you were talking about, we've gone from earth to air very much. And we just spent the last year, 2020, in a very earthy time because there were tons of planets in Capricorn, including Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto. And everything was very earthy. Everything was very Saturn earthy, confined, restriction, that sort of thing. And then both Saturn and Jupiter moved into Aquarius, and I'm sure most people have seen something about the big pileup of planets in Aquarius last week. We had 6 of the major planets in Aquarius, which is like huge energy, but that's air energy.
Mm.
And watch the rise of cryptocurrency correspond with that. Bitcoin took off and hit record highs.
Yeah, so just over $50,000 at the moment.
And we also saw the other side of air happen with the polar vortex and that sort of thing in the US and Canada. Record low temperatures, and we also saw what happened in Australia with Facebook. And you have to pay for news, and Facebook didn't want to pay for people sharing news articles and all of that sort of stuff. It has that very...
Didn't hear about that one.
Huh?
I didn't hear about that one.
Oh. So Australia, I think, passed a law, I think it's legislation, that publishers need to be paid when their news articles are shared on social media. And that includes big servers like Facebook and Google. So they would have to pay out to the publishers every time they presented those links. So every time someone hit a search query, it popped up in someone's news feed, so on and so forth. And Facebook just said no and pulled all of those services from everyone in Australia.
Okay.
I don't know what Google did or didn't do or where they are, because Facebook is the one that hit the news, but that's all. The news is now in the air. It's not in newspapers, it's not in physical publications. It really does feel like a very big shift. And I think what's happening is we're getting that preview of Aquarian energies that we're now building towards. But anyways, money. So we have these different currents in time and astrology. I mean, mundane astrology is studying those currents and figuring out when is the time for what. And when we have really intense currents, like we just did with a really heavy Capricorn time and now a really heavy Aquarian time, sometimes planets that are not in great shape in those signs, that can't act in those signs, don't work for magic, especially what they're associated with. And Jupiter in Capricorn last year, it's very much like that. Jupiter is in the worst shape it can be in Capricorn. Place in the zodiac. And it was right next to Saturn. Also very bad. And Jupiter wasn't working well for money magic. It wasn't doing its thing because it couldn't do its thing, couldn't do anything. And so people turned to Venus because Venus was actually able to function. And Venus has much shorter cycles too. We don't spend a whole year in a sign with Venus by any means.
So if people are working with the planets themselves specifically, then they should actually look at which planet is dominant at the time as well.
Yeah. I mean, one cornerstone of elections and stellar sorcery and astrological magic is watching the dignity of the planets and the rising sign, like planetary hours and planetary days. That timing is a big thing. But I also think there's a wide variation amongst people, because how we interact with the world is based on when we were born, what little blueprint filter we get. And so, what our second house looks like and its ruler in our natal chart is going to affect how we can interact with the ideas of money and value and possessions, and how we can magically relate to those concepts to create abundance.
If I remember correctly, mine wasn't so great.
I can pull up your chart.
Go on then. I remember you saying it wasn't very good. It is actually a valid point though, because I mean, if people keep chasing money and they keep chasing business opportunities and this and that and everything else to get by in life, and they keep, some people keep wondering why something gets started and then all of a sudden they get derailed. and it just keeps happening over and over and over again. And it's quite often because of your astrological influences, and when you were born.
Yeah, I think it comes down to you. There's no recipe that works for everyone in this case. You can't, just get, okay, do this on this time at this day with this and this, and ta-da, results. It's more complex than baking a cake, as they say.
Yeah, it's just some people it just comes naturally to them. Other people, they struggle with the rest of their lives, and they wonder why. And I think if we understood our birth chart a bit more, I should understand mine a bit more than I do actually. Yeah, this is when Kai wraps me over the knuckles.
Well, I mean, my key to that understanding is astrology. And that's the language I speak and what I understand and, that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that is everyone's key. There are lots and lots of different ways to understand how we relate to the universe and where we find our magical place within it, and so on and so forth. I mean, just like there's not one money spell that works for everyone, there's not one, understanding that works for everyone.
Yeah. I think it's also a valid point, though, that there is a difference between money magic and something like financial sorcery. Because as you said, somebody who doesn't have money can't expand on that what they have because they don't have it. So going straight to Jupiter and working with Jupiter wouldn't actually work. So working with Venus and Mercury also, because Venus, I would say, is very much also connected to creating the network and creating connections. And Mercury is about communication, which become very important even when you're looking for a job or when you're starting a business and trying to get those associations going. Then you can start building it, and then you can start building using Jupiter and start building an empire, etc., etc., etc. So that does become important. Just want to say hello, Andrea. How are you? She hasn't got her glasses today, so she's not going to be chatting. She's just going to be listening.
Well, we can look at it the other way too. Sometimes you don't get to choose who's doing well, and you need to do money magic now. You can't wait until Venus is doing well, or you can't wait until Mercury's out of retrograde, or another year when Jupiter's in a better sign. And so it's also important to be able to look at it from the other side and be able to relate these big magic problems to any kind of influence. So the sun, you might focus on gold and luck and abundance. The moon, you would, focus on hidden treasures and stuff like that. Mercury, communication and networking. Saturn, good banking, good regulation, safety, good structure, So being able to look at that and find the way to your goal, no matter what the terrain ahead of you is a really important skill in magic.
Yeah. What's really quite interesting? You can't see the chat.
No.
So, and Andrea asked, how about working with the sun? And as soon as she wrote it, you mentioned the sun. You did this last time, actually, when she asked a question, which was quite funny. You answered it before I even mentioned it.
But, to work with the sun, it's fairly easy to figure out what sign the sun is in because it's the same every year. And you can just look up the dates. And then you'd want to look at the qualities of that sign, that zodiac sign, and see what it's doing. If the sun is in Taurus, which it's not right now, then that would be that really spring kind of feeling, very earthy, very abundant. Taurus is Venus's sign. So fertility and fecundity and, the lush growingness. So associate your money magic with those ideas, you know. If it's in Capricorn, which is the cold, dead, quiet of winter, the end of Capricorn is the metaphorical death point. And, it's the sludge of everything that we just went through. How do you associate that with money? Well, Capricorn's about limits and safety and protecting things. And so you may do work to protect what you've got and keep things safe and rooted and, well planted so they can bloom later. So
there's actually something interesting in Jason Miller's book. He goes through the planets and how you can use the planets in various different ways, and he actually mentions with Saturn, because it's associated with death, which is very similar to what you were just talking about. Is that if you have any projects, I've got a fly going crazy here. Go away. If you've got any projects that you need to end, and you need to end them well instead of them going completely haywire and bad, you can use Saturn to actually bring that project to an end. And it's actually very similar to what you're saying about Capricorn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the example I repeat often is Mercury retrograde. Most people notice Mercury retrograde, and it doesn't mean you can't do anything. It means don't start new things, but it's the perfect time to review stuff. You got contracts you've been thinking about, your lawyer will go over them perfectly in a Mercury retrograde, because that's what it's for. It's for going back and reviewing communication and going back over things. So there's a positive and a map from A to B, magically speaking, no matter what's going on, astrologically or, whatever system you might use to figure out the energies of the moment or the energies to assist you. You just have to think your way through it. You have to be creative.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's still similar to just the natural cycles we go through monthly. I mean, men do as well. But if you actually pick up on when you're feeling drained, when you're feeling more energetic, etc., you can actually plan your month to better, take times to reflect and take times to increase and things like that. And actually take advantage of those times rather than just sitting back and going, okay, well, Mercury's in retrograde, I can't do anything.
Right. And that's why journaling is so important, because you must know thyself. If you are the primary instrument of your art, you're going to have to figure out how to use it.
Andrea says, thank you for being so intuitive, both Lee and Rev Kai. It's a pleasure. And Sabrina says, good morning. Good morning, Sabrina. You are in Houston, as far as I remember. Well, we'll find out just now. I think there's a lag on the chat, actually. Okay, so apart from using planetary magic, what other forms of magic would you actually suggest using?
Well, one of my favorites is traditional Appalachian, and I've also seen it in hoodoo lore. It's to make an effigy of yourself, a doll baby or a puppet, and dress it with clothes with pockets, and then put money in their pockets. So it's sympathetic magic, and the idea is, so here's little me, but that relates to big me. So I'm much bigger. I'm 20 times bigger, 100 times bigger. So if I make little me and I put them on the altar and I take care of them very well and make sure they're magically linked, and then I put a dime in their pocket, big me gets 100 times that. So I get $10. So you can use what little money you actually have and make it increase, manifest through that micro macrocosm understanding and relationship.
Yeah.
Now, the actual creation of a puppet or a doll baby or an effigy depends a lot on your tradition and your cultural practices. But, once that's complete, however you want to do that with namings and links and tags and everything else, then the idea that you can increase that cycle and give yourself gifts. Another one I've seen frequently is checkbook magic. So I've seen some places where you can buy the checks, but you can also make them a check that comes from the bank of the universe, from the well of abundance, that sort of thing. And you write it out to yourself and write a dollar amount in and then put it on your altar. Most people do this at the new moon, and then you can see every day that, the universe has given me this abundance, has increased, and you check in every day. And then at the full moon, 2 weeks later, you say thank you. And some people burn it, some people bury it, some people fold it up and keep it in a box on their altar, and they put one in every month, like a little bank deposit box. And then your money manifests, or whatever it is you need manifests.
Yeah, I'm actually busy making a Jupiterian cash box. Okay, hang on. Let me just go through this. Sabrina says, yes, it's cold there. Yeah. Kai sympathizes with you, don't worry.
Yes.
I don't. I'm boiling hot.
Well, if you're in Texas, then yeah, I really sympathize with you. We don't have it as bad up here in Kansas as you do in Texas right now.
Oh, okay. You can have my weather. Don't worry. Have it. I don't want it anymore. It's too hot. Liz says that was exactly what I did during Mercury retrograde. Absolutely nothing except protective morning rituals. We were also saying, Liz, that it's a good time to actually reflect, go back over communications. If you've got contracts that lawyers need to check over, it's a perfect time. So anything to do with communication, which you need to reflect on, it's a perfect time to do it. Christopher asks.
It's also great.
Yeah, sorry.
Mercury retrograde is also really wonderful for internal reflection and looking. Retrogrades turn energy inward. So if you want to communicate with yourself or your deep consciousness or your higher guardian angel or
Oh, hang on, lost you for a second there. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
All right, sorry, you froze for a second and disappeared. Okay.
These modern day seances, sometimes they hold up, sometimes they don't.
The spirits just get in the way sometimes. I'm drinking mocha, so I don't have any spirits today. Okay, so Christopher asks, can you make 10? By the way, everybody, it's poppets, not puppets. It's with an O, not a U.
Yes, puppets.
Yeah, and I know it sounds like puppets, and it's not the first time I've seen that, so I just wanted to say puppets. Can you make 10 puppets of yourself, and how is the aggregate output of this process?
Very rare. Our traditions encourage multiple puppets of the same target. So you wouldn't want to make multiple of yourself. The reasons for that are a magical link like that is dangerous to a certain degree. Just like it's powerful, it can manifest good things, it can manifest bad things. And the more pieces of yourself you are missing, or the more widespread you are, the harder it is to keep things together and keep everything safe. So Now that's concurrently. Plenty of traditions have ways to create and then use a poppet for healing, money, magic, safety, whatever it is, and then safely so that it is no longer active. And then, of course, you could create another one. But that's not all together simultaneously. So money magic is like a lot of other magic in that it gets lumped up as a category of magic that we use, but it's a huge category that's rarely actually about money. Usually, our goal in the money magic is the thing we need the money for. You know, we really need a car, or we really need to pay for this school, or, you know, it happens, but rarely is the goal to simply accumulate a pile of valuable things.
You know, money is a means to an end.
Right. And in magic, it's very important to keep in mind that the less you try to control the path between, the more likely you are to get your goal. The more you micromanage, the more options you take away from manifestation. And so by working for money itself, usually we're micromanaging things. You know, we often think, well, I just need, you know, another $500 a month to get by, and then I would be okay. And therefore we focus on the money. But what we really need is an income expenditure balance. And we don't want the expenditure to be the side that goes down.
Yeah.
So,
carry on. Sorry.
So, I mean, considering what the end goal actually is and finding a way to that with the current terrain it takes a lot more introspection and thinking and puzzling, but it's much more likely to manifest because there's more options, in my opinion.
So basically, I mean, we're definitely not aiming to make X amount of money. We're aiming to pay the rent, buy a new car, buy a new TV, whatever it is that we actually want the money for. Those would be immediate. I don't think immediate is the right word, but what I'm trying to get at is that those are one-off things. If we are planning to get from, if we're planning to get from point A to point B in a business venture, for example, I would say that we can plan the steps in between there and aim for those steps individually in order to get us to point B, instead of just doing the magic to get to point B, because then it's too broad.
Yeah, there's definitely being able to find reasonable goals and reasonable steps in there. There's a difference between managing and micromanaging. Good management is important. You need to have reasonable goals. And one very good magical reason to create a goal point is because how that comes out, you'll need to reassess what your final goal is. And, really thinking about those many times in our lives where we thought we knew what we wanted, and we get there and we go, well, things are different now. So I actually want this.
Again, that's where air comes in quite handy, because that's the goalposts to move. They do. They all do all the time with anything. So as long as we are willing to actually adapt as we move along that path as well, then we're okay. But if we keep fixating on that goal and wondering why we're not getting there, because, the goalpost has definitely moved over to this side and we're going this way and forgetting about looking that way, then it gets to, so we've got to be adaptive. We've got to flow the same way money flows, and we've got to be fluid. So if we want money, we've got to basically be the same as money. Flow, change, adapt, adjust as we move along. So yeah.
And I also think being able to focus on that end goal, well, and understand where those goals are along the way, keeps us from the great argument that magic and money should not mix because of greed. And I mean, generally speaking, we're supposed to avoid lust for results in our magic anyways. So we should have some practice in, not lusting for money, i.e. greed, and being able to avoid that in our magical goals too, because what we put out there is who we are, how we vibrate, what energies, thoughts are things. We become our thoughts. And in magic, whatever kind of magic you're doing, you amplify that greatly. You become it more and more. The magic circle amplifies it. You repeat it, all sorts of ways. And so if your goal is just to accumulate hordes of money, like Montgomery Burns or something, and Scrooge McDuck, then you're going to become that energy, and you may lose control of it. You may get to a point where you've done the magic. It's too late.
I think we, as magic users, we become a bit more realistic as well. So we are a bit more realistic about our goals. But I mean, the other side of that is that a lot of people in a spiritual path, witchcraft, magic, whatever it is, tend to view having lots of money and being wealthy and well off as being too materialistic, whereas we are supposed to be in pursuit of a spiritual path and rise above those material gains and needs. I remember years ago, if anybody came along and said they are charging to teach witchcraft, or they're charging to do a spell, they were ostracized from the community like nothing else. But I mean, we've got to survive. Everybody's got to survive. So if you're using witchcraft and magic to actually, within your life, and it becomes part of your life, business is part of our life, job is part of our life. So we've got to obviously, get ahead on that. But at the same time, we are realistic that we don't want a big boat. We don't want a big mansion. I want a little hut in the center of a forest. I mean, let's get real.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember those years of, completely being shunned out of a community for mentioning charging for a spell and things like that. And I think that comes from the idea that the body and the spirit are separate. And money was very much earthy, physical stuff. It's associated with all of those gross body things like eating and what happens afterwards. And the spirit is somehow separate and free of that and pure and not dirty. And changing your worldview to animism or something more indigenous changes that idea, because we're in a physical body. We have to be connected to the physical world. And physicality is not necessarily inherently evil or dirty or unclean. It simply is. And so when that idea changes, ideas about money change at their fundamental level too. And we can do things like understand the airy qualities of money, and the watery qualities of money, and the fiery qualities of money, and how that works in our world, how that works in our society, and how that impacts our own survival. Because really, the vast majority of magic we do at some point for survival. And money is one of the things. Everybody's got to eat. Everybody needs shelter. That's the world we live in.
Yeah, unless you want to become a complete hermit, in which case you've got to go and live in a cave. But money has had that stigma attached to it for a long time, especially in Western society, I think, where money is evil. Anybody who has lots of money is evil. And I think that with a lot of us have been brought up with that concept. For a very long time, I hated money because every time I got money, it disappeared. But it was because I hated it. It didn't want to be around me. So, you
Yeah.
know,
If you shun it, then yeah, it's going to go away. I mean, you're actively pushing that energy away and actively keeping it out of your life. So there goes money, you know. But we do have that problem in Western society that the vast majority of the people that we see with lots of money, we also see as very evil, you know, and we correlate those two all the time. But we have to keep in mind scale, you know. Money is the means through which these set of people have become um, parasites upon society. But, you know, we had dragons in the ancient lore too that did the same thing. So that's not really a new phenomenon. But the energy that they're using is money. Money itself doesn't have to be a corrupting influence unless you stop in the middle. You're going from, oh, I need money to da 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 da. If you stop at, oh, I need money, then it can become a very corrupting influence because you've dammed up the energy. You know, you've stopped the flow and the completion, and it's like, you know, getting an abscess or, you know, a pus-filled wound. It doesn't do well when things don't move and flow.
Okay, let me go to comments quick. Sabrina says she'll take the hot weather any day. It's fine. Have it. Christopher, happy to hear you guys point at the importance of actual hard work and strategy in relation to money magic. Andrea had to go. She's had a visitor. Liz, I think that 10 puppets would be something like the movie Fragmented, Broken. A little counterproductive, maybe. It would be counterproductive. I don't think I've seen Fragmented. If that is the actual title of the movie. Anyway, Christopher, I'm cool with money. Good stuff. I like it. It's not the end goal of existence, but it solves a lot of problems for you and others. Yes, no, it definitely does solve a lot of problems.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so easy to think that that is the end goal. Oh, I need 20,000 to do this project for my community. So you focus on 20,000, you know, or I need 500 more a month to get by. And you end up focusing on that. And it's very easy to think that's the end goal because it's a very easily identifiable, quantifiable, round thing we like, and we assign value to it. We can represent projects by their money value, you know. So it's really always important to look at what the end goal is and realize that, you know, the magic may solve your problem without money.
Yeah, I think that's what most people, when they talk about money magic, actually go for. I mean, that's really all they talk about is you need X amount to pay the rest of your rent because you're short this month, or you need to get that new thing, or you need to do whatever. But I think that's why I like Jason Miller's book so much, because he actually it's called financial sorcery. So it's not just about money magic, it's about your finances in general. And he goes into understanding money, how money actually operates, long-term and short-term investment. So he doesn't just focus on the magic specifically, he goes right into finances and actually building a good foundation to actually move from. And I think that's what a lot of people have been missing for a long time, is that we need to do something that's more constant. It's not just a burst of magic here and a burst of magic there because you have an emergency, or it's reactive magic or whatever. It's just that constant magic that needs to come into your life so that you have that constant flow of money and it can grow and build. And then we can all retire nicely instead of worrying about it so much, because I know I'm worried about my retirement.
Yeah, Well, I think you get to that once you've done the little immediate bursts of magic and figured out, oh, this works. Oh, this is something I can do. After a little while, you start going, well, what can I do that's bigger than that? What can I do that's long term? You know, so there is a point where that is the logical thing to do with money magic. As you were talking, I thought of the classic, never do this in a money spell. Never do a spell to get all your debts paid,
Mm.
right? But they'll all show up
Mm.
here to be paid, you know. And we have to think about money as more than a pile of gold. You know, it. I agree that having a good understanding of finances and how all of that really works is important in order to be able to manipulate it.
Mm.
You can't manipulate something that complex without an understanding of your end goal. And if you don't know what it is you're doing.
Yeah, but I think the problem is that most people don't move on from that. So all they'll keep doing every month after month, is just that, I need this little bit of extra money, or I want to go on holiday, or I want to do this, I want to do that. But there's no, I mean, as Christopher just said, it's about building wealth.
Yeah. Building wealth is different than paying the bills.
Mm.
And they're different feelings in money.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you have built wealth, you can pay the bills. If you're just trying to pay the bills, and that's all you're doing, then there's nothing backing you. There's no emergency funds. There's nothing there to actually help you through life when you do get into trouble. And then it is again that emergency magic, but at the same time that brings panic. And with panic, often a lot of times magic doesn't work because what you're thinking of is all the negative stuff. So whatever you do, all this negative stuff just gets pumped into whatever you're doing, and it just backfires.
Yeah, I mean, we don't make good decisions when we panic, which is, just that's a human thing. So moving from that short-term mindset to that long-term mindset is also part of understanding finances as opposed to just money. It's a big, complex, long-term thing that's convoluted. It's been mucked about intensely.
Mm.
So, but I agree that most people should be working long-term, and they should be working on macro goals that are personally focused, because it's where you have the most control and it's where you get the most benefit.
Mm.
And those things can be money magic that's kind of sideways at it, like, working on yourself to have a better understanding of financial theory.
Yeah.
That's money magic. It's just seems to be a sideways goal.
Mm.
That's where your skills are, if that's where the energy flow is, if that's where the opportunities are, go that way.
Yeah. Actually, coming back to the puppet thing, and Liz said, of course, I totally agree with you, Christopher. We all need money. What I said was just to contribute something to the chat. I know, Liz, don't worry. You didn't bother us, don't worry. But with the whole puppet thing, I think I mentioned it to you before. It's very similar to the hyper sigil. And some years back, I was thinking of creating a blog, which was just someone talking. That someone was completely anonymous, but obviously it was a representation of me. And it was meant to be just a journal, tracking every day what happened to that person every day. And those events would then be the similar thing as doing the puppet, only in written form. And then about a year or two ago, I came across one of these new age manifestation techniques called scripting. which is very similar actually. You basically sit down in the morning, you write out what you want to happen, and you use that as a manifestation technique. So all these seem to roll together, and I think Grant Morrison's use of the term hypersigil was actually quite interesting. And it wasn't just for what he was doing. I think a lot of the artistic, crafty type methods could actually fall into that category. I think a lot of people would probably disagree with me there, but what do you feel?
Artistic, crafty being like fine arts and painting, or like witchcraft crafty?
Anything crafty. So, I mean, the creation of a puppet, for instance. I mean, it is craft based and artistic, actually.
I agree that hypersigils and self puppets are the same idea. If you go through an artistic process to birth into creation some thought form with a physical housing that targets you, and then you create story, you make changes, you change environment, that's all the same thing, regardless of your medium. Your medium can be a cloth doll, your medium can be a wax figure, your medium can be a blog or a movie or a comic book or a series of paintings or a cartoon or, so I think there is a fundamental linkage with the process of artistic creation and the process of magic. I mean, we call it witchcraft. We say it's an art. This is not something new, that these ideas are intimately linked. Their trance happens during artistic creation. We talk about birthing artworks, I think what makes them associated is the magical part of it that targets yourself to make changes. You can use this external thing to influence this internal thing. You can create that link. You can change scale. You can change time scale. You can have more control over what's going on with you.
I can just imagine somebody who likes playing with doll houses, setting up an entire scene, an office, a house, or whatever, and just moving that figure around throughout the day as to how they actually want to be in life. I think that some people might think they're a bit crazy, but I can see the value in it.
I have a witch friend who actually does that. She loves doll houses. That is her hobby. And after a couple of years, she created a replica of her own house and then replicas of herself and her family. And, moved them around, mimic them, created the linkages, and then would, protect the house and protect her family and put money in their pockets and food on their table, and if there was a storm coming, she could cover the house with a tarp and stuff like that. So, yeah, very much so. And
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Christopher, with one caveat that wealth is not only fiat currency that can vanish overnight. Arable land, clean water, access to free energy, a good family with tuned-in values, good community, etc. There's true intrinsic value and wealth, and especially good health. Yeah, but I mean, by definition, wealth is basically how much money you have available to you without having to work for a paycheck.
Well, it's resources. It's not. It's resource. Wealth is resources. What resources can you tap? But not necessarily what is currently liquid.
Yeah.
Especially if we look back at older cultures and historic ideas, and we get into things like money, we start getting into, well, money is cattle. That's kind of abstract these days, but, it is about arable land and community resources and potential. cattle's not worth anything while it's alive, but as soon as you need it, you have a resource you can tap and turn into something wealthy, whether that's food or money or bartering power, So building wealth is a Venn diagram with money magic. There's money involved, but it's not the end all. And, many cultures consider physical health to be one of the primary wealthy resources. You've got a body that'll do it, you can do it because it's possibility. It's a resource you can tap. So that gets a different side of the earth magic coin than money magic, because it goes in the earthy fire direction instead of the earthy air direction.
Yeah. And I mean, that whole aspect of cattle, I'd always consider working with Frey to be very valuable in finances and money, because he did represent, well, it wasn't just the cattle, but I mean, it's also abundance of the crops and things like that, which if you take what it was then in those days and what it is now, it's about your crops are your finances, really.
Well, I'm sure most people these days have at least noticed crop failures in their food supply. They might not have been directly impacted by it. They might not have gone hungry, but, they're happening all over, and our media is such that usually we hear about them these days. Whereas before we might have been more divorced from them, and then way before actually on farms and that sort of thing, and much closer. But, just realizing that a bad storm or a spring that didn't have enough rain, might result in 4 or 5 months of rough life. It's the same feeling as, not getting a raise or getting a cut in pay. It's going to result in a period of really rough life. So we can see how wealth solves both of those problems. Wealth makes life easier. It's possibilities, it's resources to tap. It's available to make things easier.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to start bringing this to an end. If anybody's got any questions, get them in quickly. Christopher says, Rev, cut the grass under my feet. But I was going to mention cattle as an example of cultural wealth in my culture on my mother's side. People talk cows, not dollars. Yeah. Especially if you're getting married. It's even here now. It still goes on in the rural areas. The bolo. How many cattle can you pay for my daughter?
Yeah.
Has anybody got any questions? Next month, I'm going to get Rev Kai on to do astrology, which I know nothing about. So I'm just going to sit here and go, okay, and she's going to talk. Sorry, I did that again. So yeah, they're going to do that next month. Next month's just going to be a general topic. And then I'll do repairing the energy body in the month after. So yeah, we're going to do that next month, astrology, and we'll do it, I think, mid-month rather than towards the end of the month. We can do that. And doesn't look like anybody's got any other questions. And I didn't miss anything, so we're all good. All right, so I'm going to end this. And thank you, my dear friend.
Well, thank you for having me. This is always fun.
It's a pleasure. Okay, now all I need to do is remember how to stop this thing. Hang on, there's an end stream button up here. Okay, let me press that. Okay, bye everybody. If this ends, bye. I'll see you next week. Let's just see. End. There we go. and